Morning, everyone. Welcome to the Rangers Review morning briefing on Friday, the 7th of October. I think we're on. I'm Joshua, joined by Jonny this morning. Jonny, how are you? You're fighting off something this morning.
I've not been very well, to say the least, Joshua. Yesterday, I was in bed pretty much all day on my phone and watching The Bear on Disney Plus, which, by the way, is brilliant. So I'd highly recommend that. It's about a chef who inherits his brother's dysfunctional sandwich shop. It's great. But I'd rather be in work, to be honest, because I felt terrible all day. I had a pretty bad night last night, but I am better than I was yesterday, so I'm okay at work, but probably not going to go out and meet people or go into the office because I don't want to give anyone what I've had. But this is what happens when you have a young child, mate, because my daughter was sick earlier on in the week. Then my wife was sick. I was fine. And then all of a sudden, it hit me like a ton of bricks. I wasn't feeling that well at the start of the week, but then I was okay. But I was probably being paranoid with that, to be honest, because I was properly ill, especially on Wednesday night into sort of Thursday morning. So yeah. I've not got coronavirus though, so I've checked that. So onwards and upwards.
Onwards and upwards, right? Soldiering on. Just a reminder for everyone: you can subscribe to the website at the moment, just £1 for 2 months, as you can see in the ticker below. We've got that in the description as well. Also, a link to an interview we did yesterday with Stephen Kelly, who departed Rangers in the summer. We obviously weren't on yesterday, Jonny. I was travelling back from Liverpool the day before. I had some connection difficulties, shall we say, in my hotel. So I guess it's maybe worth revisiting now, and before we get into Robby McCrorie's contract, looking ahead to St Mirren tomorrow, looking back on the game on Tuesday night, which I think showed a golfing class. I think showed a Liverpool team that were hurting and evolving into this new style that Klopp spoke about after Rangers maybe caught them at the wrong time instead of the right time. But as well as that, as well as the gap being there, probably a Rangers performance that wasn't as good as it could have been. Do you think that's kind of fair looking back on it now?
Yeah, as I said in my piece in the newsletter on Wednesday, everything that you do has to be caveated with the fact that Liverpool are obviously just streets ahead. I mean, the stat that I've seen quite a few times, but it's pertinent, is the fact that Alisson cost significantly more than the Rangers side put together, and that's the goalie. So there's a huge difference, a monumental difference. But you know what? There's a monumental difference when Rangers play St Mirren on Saturday. So you've got to put it into context, but at the same time, it's the same thing that other teams face all the time. And I don't think Rangers played well. I don't think they laid a glove. I don't think they really caused Liverpool any problems. It's disappointing when you lose a goal so early in a game, because you're always going to be under the caution the first 20 minutes at Anfield. But it's a top bin strike by Trent Alexander-Arnold, and there's nothing you can do about that. Alan McGregor had absolutely no chance. And from that point on, you're fighting a very, very difficult battle against a team that are capable of scoring a lot of goals, Josh. So I can't really get animated about it or agitated about it. I've kind of aligned myself to the fact that this Champions League campaign is going to be very, very difficult indeed. I think Liverpool are more likely to be improved as the weeks go on because of this new formation. So I think it's going to be difficult in the return match. But it's Ibrox, and Rangers are better at Ibrox. But if I'm being honest, and I don't know what you think about this, Josh, I'd be interested in your opinion, I think the best opportunity for Rangers to get points in this group is going to be Ajax at Ibrox in the final game. On paper, that's the easiest match. And given that there'll be nothing to play for, I don't think, because Rangers are not going to win 5-0 and usurp Ajax, who are having the same difficulties as Rangers are against the other teams. So I think that's the one where Rangers can maybe go out and get 3 points. The gap between Ajax and Rangers isn't so big as it is with Liverpool, and Napoli they're just on a different planet at the moment, and the way they're cutting a swath through Serie A shows you how good they are, and it's been remarkable. I was reading an unbelievable piece on ESPN yesterday by Gabriel Marcotti, who's talking about how basically Napoli have cut the wage bill and spent negative 15 million euros, but completely reinvigorated the side with some incredible recruitment. Not a single player that they bought has been anything but outstanding for them. So they're a bit of an anomaly, I would say. But for me, I think if Rangers get 3 points out of this group with a win against Ajax, I'll be delighted, and I'll think that's a good result, to be honest, from this Champions League campaign, given the quality that Rangers are up against.
Yeah, there's 2 points, I guess, is one of which is if Rangers can get a point in one of the 2 games, which seems extremely difficult, but it's not impossible, then that Ajax game could become something special. And for all the difficulties about the group, Johnny, I completely agree with you. It would be nice to have a moment because I guess the frustration, one of the frustrations that I sense is Giovanni Van Bronckhorst last year. You remember that clip of Connor Goldson coming out before the RB Leipzig game in the dressing room? I think it was on Inside Ibrox, and he's saying, it doesn't matter. I don't care who they've got, kind of no respect. It's quite a classic thing, but it was indicative of that Rangers team at the time. It didn't matter who they played. There's still a huge gap between them and Leipzig, a huge gap between them and Dortmund. Whereas this season, it seems to be the expectations are being tempered, which I don't think plays into how Ibrox can be used. And it would be great to have, as I say, a moment or a game where Rangers are able to showcase to the highest level of European competition just how good they've been in the Europa League. Because let's not pretend that for all the difficulties they've had in these opening 3 games, you've not, apart from maybe elements of an Napoli game, there's not been a game where you've thought Rangers were brilliant. And one of the reasons I think that is, and you've seen this against Liverpool, particularly away from home, Van Bronckhorst's decision to man mark, I think it can just be exploited, not so easily because everything has risks. If you are really compact and you give up room on the wing, then there's risks with that as well. But I think you're seeing now without largely Rangers have played the same team last season in these games without Aribo and Bassi, particularly Bassi. We know how important he is. Obviously, we've seen with Tillman struggling at Anfield, the drop from Aribo in that game. Obviously he's young into his Rangers career, and domestically, hopefully, he'll go on to score a lot of goals. But you just kind of hope that there is a moment or a game, and if Rangers could manage to get a point against Liverpool, which would be difficult but not improbable, if they could manage to get something against Napoli, which, as you say, looking at them against Ajax seems really, really difficult because you don't want the group to kind of peter out. But I did think as well, just finally on the Liverpool game, Johnny, the athleticism of that team, watching them up close, the pace, the power. Someone like Joel Matip, who we spoke about after, who you kind of look on Match of the Day and you think, he's a good player. He looks quite gangly. Morelos maybe will have some luck against him. Thiago, who's quite a small guy, the strength of these guys and the athleticism to be able to just totally dominate every aspect of the game and then go and play. They were really impressive, weren't they?
Yeah, they were, mate. And one thing on that, just a quick point, is I've noticed a lot of people talk about the failure to make a 5-yard pass. But Stephen Davis is a master of the 5-yard pass. He doesn't lose the ball domestically. John Lundstrom is really good as well in that regard. If we're talking about last season, their pass completion rates must have been in the 90s or very, very high 80s. So it's not that they can't do it. It's that Liverpool are pressing monsters. Jurgen Klopp reinvented the game with his Borussia Dortmund side in terms of the gegenpress and how aggressive it was. So this was seeing an undistilled version of this new style that swept football across the world, the pressing style. And it was a different beast to anything I think Rangers have seen so far. I mean, Ange Postecoglou across the city is pressing to a ridiculous level at times. But there's nothing on Liverpool because the quality they have, the physicality they have, on top of the class they have, makes it really difficult. I mean, Stephen Davis, we know he can pass. Yeah. So to me, it's not emblematic of poor performance or anything like that, or poor players. It's just, it's a direct result of the aggression that Liverpool showed. They'd be interested to see their PPTA for that first 20 minutes. I think it would be a pretty low number.
Yeah, and I think one of the main difficulties had, just kind of rounding it up, and you can read, we've got lots of analysis on the website looking at the game in detail. Because you have Davis and Lundstrom kind of pressing up in the midfield, you just had huge gaps in front of the defence. And Rangers do seem at points, I think, in Europe to be caught in between. It was the same in Ajax away, where because of the way the kind of midfields and forwards sometimes will follow their man, if the centre-backs don't, then you can just have attackers kind of turning into space. And I don't really understand what the the approach is there. I think when you're at home, and we've seen this against Napoli, and you see, for example, Ten Hag uses quite a man-orientated pressing scheme. When you're at home, I think it can be more successful because that lends itself to aggression. But I think away from home, you've now seen a number of games where, combined away against Union, Ajax and Liverpool, I think the expected goals was 0.7, which is tiny. Yeah. I'm sure if you throw in the Old Firm as well in 4 games, that shows you away from home how Rangers have struggled to, I guess, show themselves in any good way attacking wise. So maybe something for us to look at going forward. But do you think then...
on that, Josh, I'd like to see more long balls. Honestly, Connor Goldson can ping. Ben Davies can ping. You've got Ryan Kent super fast over the top. Like, I mean, if you're going to play a team that you're going to play a really low block against and you're not going to be aggressive defensively, I'd rather you just played Fashion Sakala and Ryan Kent up front and try to ping over the top into space. And almost at least then you've got a tactic.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Rangers were trying to do is, there was one moment in the first half, just being obviously above the bench, quite often just try and see what Van Bronckhorst gets frustrated at. I think that gives you a bit of an idea of what he wants his team to do. And there was one moment where the ball worked left and Kent wasn't making that running behind. Because you're right, Liverpool obviously play a ridiculously high line, but they're also really good at it. And the difficulty is, they haven't been this season, but I thought on Tuesday they were brilliant at applying pressure on the ball. So it was just so difficult for Rangers to get any kind of concerted amount of possession. I thought the only time in the first half Ryan Kent had a couple of moments of potential moments, where he turned on the ball at one point. Obviously in the second half he's got that moment where he's running in behind. I thought the substitutes were better than a lot of players that started. Yeah, and maybe there's we wrote in the international break, Jonny, about maybe it's time to play Matondo on the left and try Kent in a different position to kind of reinvigorate his game. I know he played well against Hearts, but I think you've seen from the left a couple of nice moments from Matondo. The strange thing for me, though, as well, was you look at someone like Sakala, who's played 10 minutes of league football and is the first on the pitch. I do think that feeds into the question that, well, obviously the right wing still remains an issue, has to be said. I think an issue is fair. I asked Van Bronckhorst about it after, and he said, Tillman, it's the same role he played away against PSV. But we'll get into our teams tomorrow in a minute. Just on the substitutes, and does Van Bronckhorst know his best team? Even Kamara as well, Jonny. I thought when he came on, you could see that maybe he'd have been a little bit more suited to the game. But hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it, to kind of say these things?
Yeah, and you know what, mate? It's a different game by that point. The game state's completely different. Liverpool have run their race. They're tired. They're pressed like crazy. So there's a little bit more space. And, the fact is every single Rangers player is worse than every single Liverpool player. I mean, there's not a single player in a Liverpool squad that wouldn't walk right into Rangers' first team. So you're kind of on a hiding to nothing in that regard. You've got to come up with a tactic, and you've got to hope that they're not quite at the races on the day. And I don't think that happened. I'd be very, very wary of drawing too many conclusions from that game. It's as simple as that. Now, is there an overriding question mark about away games and Giovanni Van Bronckhorst? Of course there is. Of course there is. And Giovanni Van Bronckhorst has to go out domestically and prove that. He won't be judged in the Champions League. This is too high a level. And as people are saying, as you've said, Josh, if he gets a point at Anfield and beats Ajax at home, there's a good chance that could be enough for Europa League, which would be an incredible achievement. Do I think it will happen? No, I don't. But I think there is some merit in what he's saying about learning from your experience at this level. I've seen a lot of people talking about Club Brugge. How do we dig into that just to see? And I think they've qualified for the Champions League 6 times in 7 years. Well, that's a lot of cash coming into your club. And, I don't think that's a fair comparison. But over time, I think that Rangers need to develop and learn at this level. And if you're putting Rangers against a Liverpool or a Man City, thank God they've not played Man City, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, that would have been nice.
There's going to be a learning curve there, and there's going to be some harsh realities. Overall, though, the first 3 games at the Champions League, I'd say Ajax was completely unacceptable. A terrible performance, sloppy as anything. I thought Napoli was a good performance until the sending off that changed the game. Very good performance. until the send-off that changed the game. And I thought Liverpool last night, it was powder puff, but acceptable fundamentally. And there'll be Rangers fans that'll be bristling at me saying that a 2-0 defeat is ever acceptable. But this is the kind of reality of football now. Unfortunately, the gap between the rich and the rest has grown so much that it's very, very difficult for anyone to have a puncher's chance. There's only very, very, very few and sporadic occasions where that happens. And in the Champions League, when Liverpool are in the mood, then you're going to be on a hiding to nothing a lot of the time. And that's the way it is, unfortunately. I see a lot of people talking about Ryan Kent, Josh. I don't think Ryan Kent was as bad against Liverpool as it's been characterised. I don't think he had an awful lot of service. I don't think he had a lot that he could have done. I thought he had a couple of lovely touches, showed his class. But fundamentally, a really, really difficult game for him to make any kind of impact. I don't think Kent's played well this season. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Maybe he needs rested. Maybe giving him a chance to just take a couple of weeks out would do him the world of good. But I have to say, if I'm the manager, I'm leaving out a player that I know is amongst the best in the team.
Yeah,
he'd have to be playing really pretty bad, given the other options that are in that area. I'll tell you where I am open, Josh, is I don't know how you feel about this. Feel free to pick me apart. Why not try Kent on the right?
No, I mean, I'm actually going to find the article while you're speaking after Johnny, and I'll put it in the description. It's something that we wrote about in the international break. The reasons for which was kind of, well, can you solve two issues with one? Rangers do have an issue on the right wing. There's no, regardless of whether Van Bronckhorst says they like to play different players there for different games, that's true. But how many players have you already played on the right this season? Sakala, Ken, Matondo, Arfield, Tillman, Lawrence in the home game against PSV. That's 6 players already.
Yeah.
And Scott Wright, I don't think I counted him 7. There's no continuity there. Part of the reason, I think, is because you'll see tomorrow at Ibrox, when they line up in their shape, when they're in possession, Tavernier will normally be the furthest player on the right. I don't always think that is the bet. I like it when he's got the freedom to come and field a little bit, as increasingly happened last season.
But I like Kent inside as well. So
they
can kind of work together on that.
Yeah, as I say, I'll put this article in the description in a minute. But I think the positives of trying that would be that Rangers have tried everything else. So there's, it's not as if there's a solution there that you cannot change, you cannot rip up, because that's not the case. I think Robby Matondo, as much as against Hearts, I think he had a couple of moments that you saw how he could be impactful on the right because of that pace down the right, and that opens up the space inside for the assist. Probably his most natural position is on the left. In my opinion, Van Bronckhorst's best domestic performances have come when he's had 2 wingers in the team, and above anything else, I think that's just because they're dynamic players, and when you're trying to break teams down, what's the best thing to do is normally beat a man. If you've got players that aren't dynamic, the Dundee United 2-1 game's a perfect example. Arfield, Jack, McCann, Kent, only one player in that midfield is going to go by a man. And that makes it easier for the opposition because, the man isn't beaten, the other player doesn't have to shift across and cover, the space isn't created, and it goes round and round and round. So, and Kent obviously under Gerrard played in those pockets quite often, increasingly towards the end of the 2020-21 season, the title-winning season. He was really good in there. Again, he started almost to play as number 10, and I think he's a better goal threat from there. So I think initially it really worked having Kent out wide, and I was a big proponent of that. But given the context at the moment, given that I don't think his output is irreplaceable at the moment, and there's such a lack of solutions on the right wing, I'd be interested to see if it would happen. I don't know if it will, because I think the one position that Van Bronckhorst has not really changed, Johnny, has been that left wing position. But no, I agree with you. And I'll put the link in the description there, because I also think you've got to get Matondo in that starting 11, because, as I say, 2 wingers for me, especially when you're trying to break down teams, it makes Van Bronckhorst football, it kind of speeds it up a lot more, and I think that would be welcome. Yeah. I'm going to put that in just now. Talking about
one point here, Josh, just while you're putting that in, I wanted to address just very, very quickly. Just there's this rap video that's been that's what it's been characterised. I've not actually seen the video by I Am Chili Beef. Anyone seen that awful rap video Rangers posted on the club's official pages? Are the board determined to embarrass us? We used to be a club with class. Right, I'm not an expert on these guys. I don't know who they are. But what I would say is, on this, I think that's not something that I'm interested in or involved in or spend my spare time doing. But I know there's a lot of kids out there, especially younger demographic, who love that kind of stuff. And I'm sure that's been at the heart of Rangers thinking on that. So I think it's more about just reaching out to younger people and with something that they can relate to and connect with. It's modern audiences, TikTok, etc. As Simple Simon is saying there, just trying to reach younger people in a different way. I've spoken before about how difficult it is to reach people now because the Premier League and the absolute glamour there means that people they want to be running about the playground pretending they're Erling Haaland more than they do Alfredo Morelos to some extent. Now, not everyone, but some people. So if you can try and reach people in different ways, I think it's a huge part of the football club going forward, connecting to a larger audience. So I think that's what that's about. Simple as that. And if it makes older guys bristle a little bit, but connects with the younger audience, then I think it's worth doing. I have to say, when I saw it, I was all like, what's going on here?
I think it's called drill music.
Right.
I believe. I'm not.
Yes,
I'm
explain
not
it for us old gits, please, Joshua.
Well, I'm not that clued up on it either, but I watched a bit of it, and there was a lot of gun signs and masks and stuff. So no, I've not listened to it either, but yeah, probably. We know as well, Johnny, how the audience is. There's a lot of audience on TikTok now, and when you're trying to reach people and produce content, it's just so varied and diverse now. So, I only seen a clip of it, but I can't say that I have. Maybe I'll add it to my Spotify playlist. I'll have to listen to it first. I've not tested the waters yet. Speaking of Ibrox, if you like that link, we're back there tomorrow. For a home game against St Mirren, and we're going to get into Robby McCrorie's. I was about to call him Robby Matondo. Robby McCrorie's contract before the end of the show. St Mirren, I think, will be a really tough game, Johnny, and I'm not just saying that because they beat Celtic a couple of weeks ago. We know what Stephen Robinson is like, I think, as a manager coming away to Ibrox. You'll remember that famous 5-5-0 formation he played against Gerrard's Rangers, the 3-1 game when Rufinitten scored. That was Stephen Robinson that was the manager there. He's obviously got St Mirren to be a very organised side early on in his tenure. I think they'll seek to frustrate. And if we look at how Rangers have started games at Ibrox, which is slow, then that might make it into a difficult afternoon. I think it's very important that Rangers approach this game with the type of intensity they did Hearts away, because quickly, if Rangers start with that slow, controlled, methodical approach play, for me that just suits St Mirren. I know you can argue from the other point of view that Rangers have more quality, and over the course of the game that will come out. But if you're St Mirren, if you could have face a quick start, or if you could face a start where Rangers kind of feel like the opposition for 20 minutes, there's no doubt which one you're going for, in my opinion. Who starts for you, Johnny? Who's going to come in? What do you make looking ahead to the game tomorrow?
Well, first of all, I'd like to see Ben Davies continue at the back. I think that's important to get him bedded in, and I do think he'll be a good signing, and the more that we see of him, the better. Is it a chance for Ridvan? I think possibly, but
it has to be.
You think it has to be, yeah?
Well, the thing is with Ridvan is, I understand. We spoke about this a few weeks ago. I understand the argument that he's young, he's 21, he's a long-term investment. John Bennett made the comparison to Bassi, but as we said a few weeks ago, for me, it's just a completely different situation. He's a Turkish international. He's played 60 games for Besiktas. I don't think he's come in to sit on the bench for a season. I don't think you pay that much money for a player when there's other areas in the squad that may well have needed investment, to sit him on the bench for the whole season. And he's started 2 games. I think Kilmarnock and Queen of the South. I'd like to see him come in to play Johnny. And although Barisic's delivery has been a real useful tool when trying to break down defences. As I say, I think you've got to. It was like the Davies argument a couple of weeks ago. You've got to play him, or last week. You've got to play him. So if not when, if not now when, kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do understand that. I wonder, given St Mirren's lofty position in the table, I suppose it depends on how fit Barisic is, how fresh Barisic is. But it would make sense to kind of rotate them in and out. And this, as you say, on the open expanses of the lush green pitch at Ibrox, perhaps Ridvan is getting a good opportunity tomorrow. So yeah, I can go with that. I still probably predict Barisic in midfield. Josh, I think you need to freshen that up a little bit. You can't play Stephen Davis twice in 2 games at his age. I don't think that's wise. But Lundstrom, who's going through a little bit of a dodgy period of form, I think will play. Could be doing a little bit better. I would like to see him get back to his levels of last season. I think it's been a bit patchy, a bit up and down so far this season. Alongside him, probably Glenn Kamara, to be honest. If you're looking at trying to freshen it up a little bit, Tillman in front of them. I think you need to give Tillman, after his confidence knock and the criticism that he's received, I think you need to give him a chance in number 10. And then I would play Kent on the right, as we've discussed, and then on the left, Matondo with Cholak up front.
It's kind of got to be Cholak. Unless Morelos and Cholak play together, you can't. His goal record in domestic games is too good to bench him so far. I mean, I'd go with. I don't know if Ridvan will start, but back 4, kind of as discussed, definitely Ben Davies in there. I thought harsh on Liam King, who I thought did really well. And
he was excellent.
His pace, especially up against Diaz in a couple of moments, I thought was really impressive. It's something we spoke about in the international break. Kind of quite deceivingly quick when playing that high line. I think against Dundee United he showed that quite well. But I think Ben Davies has been brought in to be the long-term partner for Goldson. I thought, and I think you can see with when he stepped into midfield, he's quite comfortable doing that. I think that'll help in home games. And Klopp was speaking about it in his press conference. Davies really good at building play, adds balance with his left foot. So go with that. I think for me, it's got to be one holding midfielder. And I know Glenn Kamara hasn't played much football, but this is an example for me of maybe the midfield still needing to have been slightly recalibrated in the summer to get more attacking options in there, because you've got so many injuries at the moment. So for me,
Lundstrom, on that,
yeah,
Lundstrom was box to box through his entire career, and he's become like this guy who just sits. Why not play Kamara and allow Lundstrom to push forward? He's got a hell of a shot on him.
He has, and I think he has. The game against St Johnstone at home, he had 6 shots. The game against Ross County, he opens the scoring. I think when he's given that freedom to go, he can do that. But you don't need, against a team like when you're playing this game, for me, you don't need 4 players behind the ball. When and what you've seen, I think Ross County as well. Rangers were almost just leaving one back and allowing Lundstrom to go behind the midfield, St Johnstone as well. And what that does is it just takes a position that might be a bit sterile when you're trying to break down an opponent. St Mirren, if Rangers have 4 players behind the ball, that will suit them down to the ground. And I just think that Lundstrom and Kamara in a game like this, how many times have we seen that? Two midfielders who, I know Lundstrom, you're saying he's a shot, but he's not an attacking midfielder. Kamara's inclination is not to go for goal when he gets into those attacking areas, comparing to someone like Tom Lawrence. So I'd go for just one Lundstrom and then maybe an Arfield and a Tillman. I agree with you. I think you've got to play Tillman through this run of form because, 1, there's no one else. 2, you've seen in the early stages of the season, I think, how good he can be. And 3, it takes players a bit of time and he's young. I'm going to agree with you. I don't think it'll happen, but I'd like to see Kent and Matondo. I think it's important to have that dynamic element in a team, which wingers give you. And Van Bronckhorst football for me looks a lot better with that. And then you've got to start Cholak up front without, any realistic likelihood that Cholak and Morelos play together, which hasn't materialised as of yet. The fact that Morelos will play against Liverpool at home. But this is going to be a problem going forward, because if you want to keep Morelos at the club, Johnny, you've got to play him. And if he's sitting on the bench, if any player's not going to be happy about it, it's going to be Alfredo Morelos. But I agree with you. I'd like to see them do something different on the right and left positions. Whether it will happen or not, we'll just have to see.
Someone was asking there, have we ever got a starting lineup correct? It doesn't happen very often.
It doesn't happen very often. It doesn't.
But quite a lot of the time, we're also playing the game of, who would we play as opposed to necessarily who do we think Giovanni van Bronckhorst will play. You can apply these different methods to this sort of this little game that we play, but it's just a bit of fun. Let's not take it too seriously. Josh, are we going to talk about Ross McCrorie?
Yeah, let's finish up on
Robby McCrorie.
Robby McCrorie. That's us called him.
Ross McCrorie would be a different podcast, wouldn't it?
That would be a very different podcast. I'm just going to read out the quotes that Giovanni van Bronckhorst said about it. Johnny said, "I'm delighted Robbie's agreed to sign a new deal with us. He's continuing to develop as a goalkeeper and has learned so much from Alan and John. His recent Scotland call is a testament to his quality and his professionalism, and his attitudes are a real credit to Robbie and a real asset for the club." Is this Robby McCrorie being lined up to be Rangers number 1, Johnny? If that was the case, why wasn't he number 2? That's obviously the postman at my door. Why wasn't he number 2 this season? What do you make of it all?
Well, it's a bit curious how it's all panned out. Listen, I know from speaking to people at the club that Robby McCrorie is someone that they've been wanting to tie down. This is not just out the blue. This has been going on for quite some time, trying to get agreement. And Robby McCrorie is rated within the club, and they see him as an academy graduate that can take the step up to the first team. That's been my information for quite a long time. So I've kind of been wondering when this might fall into place, or if it would fall into place, because obviously McCrorie would have been expecting, I would imagine, to have taken a more active role in first team proceedings this season. There's no doubt about it. I thought he was excellent when he came into the team under Steven Gerrard. Those 2 games, Alashkert and Celtic, were high pressure, very, very big games. And if Rangers hadn't made it past Alashkert, that would have been a serious issue for the club, not having European revenue. So the most high pressure of games, that one, and I thought he performed really well. So he showed he's got chops. The problem you have is you've got John McLaughlin, who's been waiting there patiently for a chance, and you've got Alan McGregor, who wanted to hang around, and you can see what Alan McGregor's still capable of, as we saw the other night. In terms of shot stopping, he hasn't diminished. He's nearly 41, he hasn't diminished. So I think it's been a difficult one for the club to keep all 3 plates spinning at the same time. But I think we've got a bit more information now. And I'm just going to be brutal and be brutally honest. I don't think John McLaughlin is good enough as a shot stopper to be Rangers number 1 keeper. Now, he hasn't had a huge amount of opportunity, but in the games he has been involved, I think his overall saves above average is -3 or something like that for the league. And that's just miles away from where you need to be as a Rangers keeper. I know that's probably skewed by a very poor single performance against Celtic, and he is very good with the ball at his feet. But I think that we've seen enough to say it's going to be very difficult for John McLaughlin, aged 34, I think he's 34, to be the long-term answer for Rangers. So I think that's been answered. So I think what this allows is Robby McCrorie to come in for this season as the number 2 for Alan McGregor. That's how I would manage it. And then for him to either step up to the first position next season, or for him to compete with another keeper that's brought in, because you can't imagine Alan McGregor's going to go for another season age 41. That just seems like it won't happen. But I mean, you never rule anything out. Never rule anything out, Josh.
Yeah,
I didn't think Alan McGregor would stay for this season.
No,
so,
I agree with you.
Although it might seem a bit strange, the scenarios, I think there's always been a desire to see Robby McCrorie remain at the club. I don't know if they'll maybe see the opportunity to send Robbie out on loan for 6 months between January and the end of the season, given that McLaughlin's still there. But we'll see on that. I certainly think Alan McGregor is now back to being the undisputed number 1. And I think John McLaughlin, while we can see the benefits of having him involved in terms of the build-up, I think you need to be a better shot stopper to be a Rangers number 1. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, we'll see. No, definitely a discussion to have in full another day. But I think in the short term, you have to say it's the right decision. But in the long term, Rangers, I think we've said for a long time, I think to evolve, they also need to evolve with a keeper who can do both, and maybe that is something that we'll look back on hindsight that should have been done in the summer.
Josh, just on that, and
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your opinion on it. It's going to look a bit weird if he doesn't go down this route of making McCrorie number 2 now, doesn't it?
Oh, totally. I mean,
it looks a bit nonsensical. It doesn't really make it smacks of strange decision making if he doesn't do that.
And also the fact that think how much McGregor and McLaughlin won't be small earners. And if you've then got a situation where, let's say hypothetically, McLaughlin does become your third keeper, not only is that such a turnaround from the start of the season where he was trusted after the Old Firm, where he played in the Champions League qualifiers, you've then got a player who signed a new contract last season, was your number 1 at the start, whether or not Van Bronckhorst says that he was, and then is your third choice. So it totally is, and I think this situation needs to kind of come good, if you will, for it to not be criticised, because I totally agree. McCrorie surely has to play games. Again, I think it's one that maybe in hindsight we'll look back on and say that should have been resolved better in the summer. Maybe McCrorie should have just been number 2 to a new goalkeeper. Maybe McCrorie should have been number 2 at the start of the season to McGregor, as it's materialised, because he is now the number 1. But yeah, I think I can't imagine that he signed this contract on the presumption that he doesn't play any cup games, that he's not number 2. But yeah, I guess time will tell. We'll have to wait and see.
We felt, and a lot of fans felt in the summer, that the best way to deal with it would have been to give John McLaughlin a chance at number 1, make Robby McCrorie number 2, allow Alan McGregor to retire, and if there was needing to be a new keeper in January because McLaughlin wasn't performing, then you go out and get one. But I understand there's flaws in that. You never really want to have to go out and under pressure in the January market to get a first-team pick. Alan McGregor didn't want to retire. He wanted to stay on. So I think the club are in a real difficult situation from a sort of PR point of view with a club legend like McGregor. You can't really turn around to him and say, "No, Alan, thanks very much." You're
well,
done.
You could, yeah. And I don't think McGregor in this initial instinct is the issue. You see against Liverpool.
Well, that's the point. That's the point I'm trying to make is, he's proven that he isn't done.
But then equally, Johnny, the other side of it is we can't have short memories and forget the games against Motherwell last season, Ross County, Hearts, all of which did show weaknesses and regression. And McGregor's come back before. Equally, of course, common sense says there has to be a time when everyone retires. Otherwise, we would have a lot of 41-year-old, 42-year-old, 43-year-old players in the professional game. My opinion on it kind of is that I think I thought McLaughlin should be number 1 at the start of the season. I think after that Old Firm game, I think if you look at McGregor's performance against Napoli and Liverpool, I don't think McLaughlin gives you that. And I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
I also think that Rangers need to have a goalkeeper who's better with the ball at his feet to mirror what's happening with all the top clubs, which is that they can be a real asset in possession. And I'm not convinced that the problems that arose with McGregor last year won't arise this year, because that if you do the same thing, are you not going to get the same outcome? Again, that's not necessarily a criticism of McGregor, because I think it's just the fact that he's got a bit older. Probably, in my opinion, at the end of the season, it will be a discussion that says Rangers should have got in the summer a player that can do both. A player that is a good shot stopper, will be an asset in possession as well. But I think like a lot of, you look at how many players are out of contract next summer. It's maybe something that's been put down the line. But I think at the moment, as much as I thought McLaughlin should be number 1, when you look at those performances from McGregor, it's hard to argue that, and his shot stopping numbers. It's hard to argue that he shouldn't be based on his continued ability to make the difference, when he's under pressure. But as I say, definitely one to revisit. I think we'll leave it there, Johnny, because we went on for 40 minutes and me and you have some work to crack on with. Remember, folks, you can subscribe to the website at the moment, just £1 for 2 months. I've put the link in the description and the comments for some of the articles that we've referenced throughout this morning. We'll be speaking to Giovanni Van Bronckhorst this afternoon at the press conference, so do keep up to date with us on our socials and the website to hear from him. I'll be at Ibrox tomorrow as well, so we'll be live before and after the game with all your usual coverage. But until then, thanks very much for joining us and enjoy the rest of your Friday.